Hi, y'all. I'm Julie. I'm a trauma-informed adoptee coach and somatic healing guide. After overcoming deep abandonment wounds, I now help adult adoptees move from feeling lost and disconnected to experiencing profound self-belonging. I know what it is like to carry the weight of abandonment, to feel stuck in patterns of longing, adapting, and searching for belonging. To have tried every healing modality available and come up empty. My own healing has taught me this. The answers aren't out there. They're buried within me, and I'm here to guide you home to yourself. The Resilience Project podcast brings voice, visibility, and validation to the parts of adoption society rarely names, but all of us feel. Through a trauma-informed somatic lens, I explore the lived experiences of the entire adoption constellation with a tender emphasis on the adoptee experience. This podcast goes beyond storytelling into soul-telling. It offers embodied insight, compassionate education, and a path towards awareness, hope, and strength. Each episode invites listeners to understand adoption more deeply, not just with the mind, but with the nervous system, and to reconnect with the truth, identity, and belonging that were always yours to come home to. Welcome. Hey, everybody, I just wanted to remind you about what's coming in May on the 23rd and the 24th. Liz and I did our episode last week where we introduced it. I will make sure all of the information is in the show notes for you to register and be able to attend our first live event called Unmothered, a Revolution in Adoptee Healing. And I am so excited about being with you at our first live event. So if you have any questions, you know where to find me, and look forward to talking to you soon. Welcome back to the Resilience Project podcast. So glad to be with you today. And I have been really thinking about this episode for a few weeks now, knowing that this was what was next. And last week, as I was driving around listening to Cody Sanchez's Big Deal podcast, she had Tony Robbins on, and he said something that really triggered me, and in a good way, actually. And I immediately said to myself, I have to actually intro the podcast with this because it really stirred something in me. So I wanted to share it with you. He was talking about when we are born, and he said, we don't have to do anything to be loved. We cry, we scream, we make messes, we take up space, and love is still there. But at some point, for most people, there's a moment when love becomes conditional. When fear enters the body, and when we start trying to figure out what to do or who to be in order to stay connected. But for adoptees, that moment doesn't actually happen later in life. It happens at the very beginning. The day love stops for us is the moment we are separated from our first biological birth mother, whichever phrase you use, before language, before memory, before choice. Fear then enters the body immediately, and we begin operating from a place of survival without even knowing it because it's not conscious. So from that moment on, intimacy becomes complicated. This is one of the core issues that we as adoptees deal with, not because we don't want intimacy, but because our nervous system learned from day one that connection can disappear without warning. So we adapt. Paul Sunderland said in one of his talks that he thinks adoption should be called adapt-tion, which in a lot of ways I agree. We learn to survive. We learn to read the room. We learn to stay close without actually fully resting in that closeness because of fear. But for people who aren't adopted, that original rupture often doesn't exist. Love was disrupted later through conflict or loss or disappointment. Our loss started right at the beginning, as I've talked about in a previous episode. But there is still a foundation of safety underneath because they're going home to the parents that have biologically created them, so to speak. For adoptees, intimacy is built on a nervous system that learned very early. Love can go away, and I have to make sure it doesn't. So that's why intimacy isn't just emotional for us, it's physiological. It lives in the body before we actually understood it. And that's why healing intimacy has nothing to do with trying harder or talking more, and everything to do with restoring safety where fear first entered. And that's what we do in my programs. We gently and carefully titrate your ability to hold your own self in love. And so I want to actually share with you some slides that I use with my clients. This is from the self-love module that I do with them. And I believe this will be really, really helpful. You probably are going to want to get a pen and paper if you want to take notes. Think that might be helpful. And we're going to go ahead and get going and present here. So what's important here is, in order to deepen our connection, we need to learn what interdependence is. This is something that I was not good at. I can tell you right now. I'm going to actually make this full screen. There we go. That should help. Okay. The best way to practically understand interdependence, it's basically our relationship with God, universe, divine, whatever you call it, and ourselves. And then from there, we are able to, from that overflow, have relationships with others. Not saying that we can't before this, but usually if we have not figured out how to love ourselves, how to love God, how to love the divine, how to love something greater than ourselves, we have a really difficult time in relationship with others. So in other words, interdependence is defined as a process of being able to connect with our God in a way that deepens our connection with ourselves, and then in turn allows us to be more connected with others. Hence the image that I wrote here that has really helped me in this process. Okay, so this image right here is really, really important. So I'm hoping y'all are watching on YouTube because this will be really helpful. So it's important to be able to define the relationship here. We need to clarify some things. We've heard a lot, probably in recovery spaces, about codependence. We've heard a lot about independence. I don't think we talk a lot about interdependence. So you may want to take a screenshot of this just for your own benefit, but this is something that has really helped me. And a quote that I heard on one of my dear friend Becky's podcasts by Sarah Beyer is, codependency is a mode of nervous system regulation where we try to regulate our own nervous systems by controlling other people's emotions and reactions. This is what I was just talking about at the beginning. We enter into the world with so much fear that we do our best to control through other people versus actually learning how to trust ourselves and love ourselves, which I also did an episode on self-trust where there's probably going to be some overlap here. So let's talk about codependence. That's a relationship where you're unable to be healthy with yourself, with God, with others, because really your dependence is on how they view you. There's difficulty with self-worth. There's difficulty with boundaries. There's difficulty with even knowing yourself, God, and others. I know for me, if somebody would have asked me before I started any of my work 20 years ago, if I knew what my favorite color was, I probably would have said, nope, let me ask my husband. Not kidding. And it's unbelievably sad. I really depended upon him for my opinions. That's my own fault. I didn't have my own self-trust and self-love at that point, and I didn't even know what my favorite things were. Difficulty with self-care. I had a very difficult time even believing that it was okay to get on the floor and play with my kids, or to take some time to read for myself, or everything had to do with making sure everybody else was okay. Whereas interdependence is being able to be in a healthy relationship with self, with God, with others. It's a healthy belief in your own worth. It's healthy boundaries. It's knowing and loving yourself and God and others. And this is a continual relationship. It's not just something that happens overnight. It's knowing how to care for yourself, but not without including others and God in that. One of the things I noticed when I first started in my reunion with my birth father's side was they actually highlighted the fact that I was so independent. I didn't include them in their lives, and they wanted to know what was going on with me. They wanted to know my day to day. And I didn't really know how to do that. I had learned independence. I'd never had sisters. I didn't know how to do this. And so I'm probably still working on this in many ways, y'all. It's not an easy thing, and it will be something that I grow in forever, but I'm so glad that they felt like they could tell me that. We want to know more. Can you learn how to do this with us? Because we've lost 47 years with you. So what a blessing it was that I was able to experience that. Whereas independence is focused only on self in an exclusive, not inclusive way, and rarely includes God or others. It's where worth comes from actual self-reliance. I've definitely been here, where we throw up walls because we don't want anybody to cross them. We don't want to get hurt. We don't want to risk anything. Self-reliance is what matters here, not God reliance. And we only care for ourselves, and we have a hard time including others and God. So what I would recommend is ask yourself the following questions. And there is a slide if you want to take a screenshot of this, if you can. If not, take note here. Which one do you identify most with from the previous slide? Is it codependence? Is it interdependence? Is it independence? No judgment, just curiosity. Then think, is it adding or taking away from your ability to truly live your life? Is there anything keeping you from interdependence? And if so, what is it? For me, it was myself. I was keeping me from it because of my fear of what I just described in the beginning of this podcast episode. So what is one little shift that you can actually make this week to move toward interdependence? It could be something as simple as I'm going to pick up the phone and call my best friend and let her know what's going on in my life, or I'm going to send a text with a picture of what's going on in my day. That's what I started doing. I started sending pictures to my friends and to my new siblings that I just had met, letting them know what was going on in my day. And that felt so vulnerable to me. But one little shift, one little action, what one little thing can you do to shift? And then this is something that we just talked about in Revolution. I believe it was last week. We had Kathy McKechnie come in and speak about this, but this is one of the modalities that I feel like is very important for adoptees to become familiar with in our own healing. And it's a theory that describes different internal parts of the self. Now, I say here in this slide, like the saboteurs we discussed in week 1. So in week 1 of my Restoring Self program, I ask all of my clients to take what is called the saboteur assessment. And I'm going to share that with y'all in the show notes because I think everybody needs to take this. And what it does is it reveals all of those inner critic voices for us, the ones that are the loudest. For me, it was stickler, pleaser, and controller. And I can go in and talk about all of these at some other time, but I think it's so crucial and important for us to begin to learn what our internal family system looks like. All of these saboteurs that you'll find when you do this assessment, they make up that internal family. And when we began this process in my Restoring Self program, and back when I did it live, it was called Reborn, Emerge from the Fog. What we've begun to develop through this process of getting to know these saboteurs or these inner critics is we develop a relationship with them and acknowledge them and show them compassion. We don't try to exile them. We do our best to welcome them because for years we have been trying to quiet them. That is not what works. I don't know if you've noticed that. They get louder and louder. So if there's any part of yourself that you can't or won't make room for, if any part doesn't belong, then in truth, no part fully belongs. So it's learning how to really include, that's a quote from Christopher Hewart's from the Enneagram of Belonging, actually. So it's important. It's this whole idea of Inside Out. I don't know if y'all have actually seen that movie, but I also highly recommend that you watch both movies. There's a 1 and a 2. It was actually created by an IFS therapist. But just like any family system, there are those that we struggle liking, but we usually love them anyway. So it's important with our internal family systems as well that we don't exile the parts of us that have served a purpose in our childhood to keep us safe, even in our adulthood to keep us safe, but to show them love and compassion and thank them for getting us to where we are today because they were protecting us. So it's so, so important. I encourage you to potentially name them because it's really fun to interact with them. I named my stickler Sally, and anytime she shows up, when she shows up, I'm like, hey girl, what's up? What do you need? I interact with her. I'm curious. I'm compassionate. There's no judgment. I allow her to rant when she needs to in order to be able to really develop that relationship of intimacy with my parts. So the first step really is interdependence, of self-love, of developing intimacy. It's learning how to be interdependent with that internal family system that I just described, that you can find out who they are and who their voices are by doing the saboteur assessment that I will share with you. This is learning how to allow your parts a place, like I said earlier, and not exiling them, including your God, universe, divine in that process. And if it feels safe, including safe people along the journey too. And in the self-trust episode, I talked a lot about that. I shared the braving acronym, so I'll go ahead and put a link to that episode so y'all can go back and listen to it. But including safe people along this journey, those who have earned the right to be that for you. So your story and your truth totally matter. And I think it's important to realize how to be able to develop self-love. This is crucial, critical as a part of developing intimacy with ourselves. So all of that to say, I hope that you have found this beneficial for you this week. I am in the process of getting ready to move to Utah this upcoming Friday. So this episode will be released that first week I'm actually in Utah. I'll be spending time with my birth family there and learning about them and our culture even more and connecting with them and being more interdependent with them in ways that I've not been able to in my life. So very, very excited about that. And as always, if any of you have any questions, comments, concerns about what I've shared or feedback, please feel free to DM me at any of the socials. I love having conversations about this, and just drop podcast into the DMs and I'll send you a resource that has really helped me with self-love and with intimacy. So look forward to talking to you next Thursday, and I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for listening.